What is up, Democratic, Socialist, Libertarian, Richard? What's up, my friends? Things are getting crazy. Today I'd like to review or analyze an article by Chris Hedges called New Rules of the Game. This came out in Truthdig, and what Hedges is saying is that if, and that is a big if, Bernie Sanders should win the Democratic nomination for president, both the Republicans, of course, will be against him, but the Democrats, the establishment Democrats, will team up with the Republicans to attack Bernie Sanders and make sure he's defeated. But there's a lot of components to this. So let's break down Hedges' article. I'm going to add my own insights, and let's see where we go. Okay. So I'm going to read in the beginning part of the article what Hedges had to say if Trump should find himself facing one of the corporate Democrats, which is most likely. So Buttigieg or Buttigieg, whatever the fuck Deep State Pete's name is on, no disrespect to anybody with that name, but that guy is bad news. Or Biden, or what's the other clown? Bloomberg. So if Trump faces one of the corporate Dems, Hedges says the mainstream media and everybody will say Trump is an amalgamation of Adolf Hitler, Al Capone, and the Antichrist. Trump will be the devil himself, Lucifer rising, Satan incarnate. Now, what happens if by some miracle, and I do mean miracle, I'm going to lay out how the stars would have to align for Bernie Sanders to win the Democratic nomination. But if Sanders should win, Hedges used a parable from the New Testament. It was the story where Jesus did an exorcism. He performed an exorcism on a guy. The demons flew out of this guy and went into a herd of swine. And the possessed swine ran into a lake and drowned themselves. And the analogy is, if Bernie should win, the Democratic corporatists, the so-called quote-unquote liberal media, they will excise all the demons from Trump, every negative thing they said to him, and just like Jesus pushed those demons into the herd of swine, they will put Trump's demons into Bernie and make him the devil incarnate. Reminds me of the Exorcist movie. Maybe they took that from the Jesus parable as well, where at the end of the movie, the devil jumps out of the little girl and goes into the priest. A little side note there. All right, let's get back to business. Hedges also talked about the 1972 presidential election where George McGovern ran against Richard Nixon. And once again, the establishment Democrats sided with Nixon. They preferred Nixon over McGovern, who was very anti-war. The Vietnam War was raging at the time. The military-industrial complex, the bankers wanted to keep that baby rolling. It was a cash cow. So McGovern lost. Corporate Dems rigged it against him to a large extent, although the Democratic Party was not one iota, not one micrometer as corrupt as it is today. It is a satanic mafia, to say the least. In Hedges' article, he mentioned some quote-unquote Democrats who are already trashing Bernie. These are registered Democrats. He starts off with Lloyd Blankfein. Blankfein, the ex-CEO of Goldman Sachs, right? Goldman Sachs, one of the most evil financial institutions in the world. They make their money off genocide, war, environmental destruction, debt slavery. If Satan himself would have a temporal agency, it would be Goldman Sachs, the United States House of Rothschild. And Blankfein said if he was a Russian, he would vote for Bernie, trying to smear Bernie by calling him a Russian agent. He mentions Hillary Clinton. She trashes Bernie, said she wouldn't vote for him if he was elected, even though Bernie supported her when she cheated him out of the 2016 primary. I think he had to do that if he wanted to stay in the party. Hedges mentions Jonathan Chait, if I'm pronouncing the name right. He wrote a piece for the New Yorker, trashing Bernie. He writes op-eds, opinion pieces, articles. He is a huge neocon who wears a liberal cloak, but underneath is a hardcore neocon, pushed the Iraq war hard. Terrible individual. David Frum in The Atlantic, trash Bernie. Frum was the former member of the George W. Bush neocon cabinet, the George W. Bush cabinet that originally was the Project for a New American Century, who just before taking office wrote a policy paper stating that we needed a new Pearl Harbor, and then we could invade a series of Middle East countries. Right after they got into power, we got 9/11, and they invaded the exact same countries they wrote about in their paper. And coincidentally, we did have that Pearl Harbor. Kind of makes you think. Jennifer Rubin, this woman, if the Israel Likud party were to put an agent in a media position, the agent would act very similar to Jennifer Rubin. No loyalty to the United States whatsoever, a traitor to the core, a hardcore neocon, Israel lobbyist, just a treasonous. This is one case one time I think the C word would be adequate. It's too bad it's been eradicated from our vocabulary by the Orwellian PC thought police. Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, trash Bernie. These are all, supposed liberals, Democrats, hardcore proponent of the Iraq war, pushed globalization, NAFTA big time, got behind all that, a globalist to the hilt. And of course, Hedges mentions our friend Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews, who works for MSNBC, owned by Comcast, which helped kill net neutrality, deep ties with the deep state, and prior to Comcast owning MSNBC, the owner was GE, a defense contractor, military-industrial complex. So what is it? Look at all these names that are trashing Bernie. Israel lobby, Rothschild Zionist, Goldman Sachs bank cartel, military-industrial complex, deep state propagandist. This tells you something, that these agents of evil are trashing Bernie. They do not want to see a Bernie Sanders candidacy. It screws up their plans. But let's go further. Chris Hedges goes on further in his article to state that Bernie is not really that radical. So the points that Hedges brings up, Bernie wants a $15 minimum wage. He wants universal health care, Medicare for all. He wants free college education. These were all points that were put forth by Eisenhower, Truman, Kennedy. He also, Hedges mentioned Bernie was anti-fracking. Nixon, a really bad guy, even somebody as evil as Nixon instituted the Environmental Protection Agency, had wage and price controls, and Nixon was a nasty guy. But these guys all enacted policies that Bernie is talking about, or at least put forth as possibilities. And yet Bernie is some kind of crazy communist, left-wing, radical. No, this is what Bernie would be, a normal president back in the day, what they would used to talk about it. But we've gone so far to the Milton Friedman neoliberal fascist right that Bernie seems crazy, by the standards of our current neoliberal system. Bernie seems like a radical, a bomb-throwing Trotskyite. But this is stuff that normal presidents used to talk about. We have entered an Orwellian dictatorship, the decline of a corrupt, high-tech Roman Empire. All right. Now, what Hedges mentions is Bernie has said nothing about nationalizing banks, which would be really radical but cool. At least have a public option bank to compete with the private rip-off banks. He says nothing about prosecuting the war criminals who enacted torture, who waged illegal wars of aggression, contrary to the Nuremberg trials. Bernie has said nothing about stopping the NSA surveillance and eavesdropping programs. So nothing radical at all. Bernie is a moderate Democrat or Republican, between 1945 to maybe 1965, 1968. Let's say 68. All right. Hedges uses a lot of a term throughout his article, the least worst. So the corporate Democrats are setting up the least worst. Well, Trump is bad, Bloomberg's bad, but Bloomberg is not as bad as Trump, the least worst, or Biden, or Buttigieg. Another term for that would be always voting for the lesser of two evils. And that's what happens when you vote for the least worst, the lesser two evils. It gets worse and worse, and you go lower and lower till you get to the pond scum, till you get to the Trumps, till you get to the Clintons, till you get to the George W. Bushes, till you get to the Obamas. Just the worst, degenerate, greedy, psychopathic destroyers of the working and middle class. Hedges says that the Democrats should have walked out when Clinton came in with his globalization treaty, NAFTA, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which tore down the wall, which separated investment banking from, citizens' deposits, whether in checkings or savings accounts. And once he tore that down, these Wall Street parasites stole all our money, gambled in the crooked casino. We had to bail them out. They've destroyed the economy. That is economic terrorism. These Wall Street parasites are 1,000 times worse than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whoever. These are the worst of the worst. Just total leeches, tapeworms. They do nothing for society. They produce nothing. They just move money around, fees, debt slavery, no creation, no production. They need to go, just like it's tapeworm. We need some strong medicine to get rid of them so they can be flushed out. Hedges touches on that Biden, Buttigieg, or Buttigieg, Bloomberg, all interchangeable. He used the term mercurial. So one week, Bloomberg's up, Buttigieg's up. This week it's Biden, whatever. They're all the same guy. They all have the exact same deep state banking, endless war policies. Now here's the deal. as far as Sanders getting the nomination, I'm going to quote Hedges in his article. The only way Sanders could get the nomination is because of Keystone Cops' ineptitude of the Democratic leadership. And Hedges is exactly right. They would have to screw up royally. You would have to have a perfect alignment of the stars. All right, so I'm going to end the article. I will put a link in the description box. Whatever your place on the political spectrum, I think Hedges is worth reading. So if you're, I don't care if you're a Ron Paul libertarian, a constitutionalist, a paleo conservative more on the right, you're middle, or you're more like me, democratic socialist, but with a libertarian streak. I like my civil liberties, and I do believe there is a place for ethical entrepreneurship. However, so it doesn't matter what you call yourself, whatever label you want to stamp on yourself, compartment. I know our brains think in, they compartmentalize everything. So that I guess we have to use those terms. It doesn't matter whether you think Hedges is left, whatever. He does a great job in analyzing the current pathologies of the United States empire, and I agree with him. This thing is in rapid decline, and it is going to get nasty. All right, so Hedges over. Let me give my points. Yeah, you would need a perfect alignment of the stars for Bernie to even enter the race. Take the Iowa caucus, right? Remember they had that Shadow Inc. app that Buttigieg and Hillary Clinton were tied to. It malfunctioned. They were going to even though Bernie lost because they had the delegates, they were trying to rig the popular vote. The app failed. And so you could have technical glitches, and they're cheating. So those things could go awry in the area of technology. Then you'd also have to contend with the really big wall, which is the superdelegates. Superdelegates have been picked by the corporate Democrats. These are people from the Israel lobby, the banking, financial sectors, the deep state, corporations. The only thing I could foresee is if maybe they all go to a buffet, they have some kind of dinner, there's some kind of massive food poisoning where they all have to be hospitalized, emergency second string delegates are substituted and they vote for Bernie. That's the kind of miracle it would take to get past the superdelegates, because that is a rigged house right there. Another obstacle for Bernie to win that you have to get through is the corporate media brainwashing. As Hedges said, should Bernie win the Democratic nomination by a miracle, the mainstream media is going to side with Trump. They're going to be 100% against Bernie, so 24/7. Bernie's the devil. Bernie's a communist. Bernie's a Trotskyite. Bernie's going to burn down the country. Bernie's going to turn into Venezuela. Never mind that we've had economic sanctions on Venezuela for going on 15, 20 years, whatever it is, destroying their economy. But anyway, the point is the public is going to be inundated with anti-Bernie propaganda. The average person is busy. They work. I don't care what their income bracket is, whether they're working class, middle class, whether they own a business, they're a doctor, lawyer, construction worker. People are working to exhaustion to pay whatever lifestyle they can maintain, whether it's very low or somewhere a bit higher. They're tired. They come home exhausted. They turn on CNN, Fox, MSNBC. That is the news for a large segment of the population, where they go to Google News on the internet. They get New York Times, Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Atlantic, whatever. All corporate propaganda. They have no other message to counteract the Rupert Murdoch, beta wave, dream machine, brainwashing. It's, so there's not a counter narrative. A lot of people just don't have it, unfortunately. All right. Then now I'm going to get to the big one. Let's say Bernie over every one of those things. So they turn on to another medium like Truthdig or Jimmy Dore or RT. So they counteract the brainwashing, the food poisoning with the super delegates. They get sick, and the glitches like Shadow Inc. app they had, all that stuff. You still got to get past the Diebold voting machines. Diebold, a transnational financial corporation, counts the votes for the United States presidential election. The votes are their property. They own the proprietary rights to all that data. There's no third parties that could come in to check Diebold's work. So that is their last firewall. They could put any numbers they want out. They could say Mickey Mouse won. That system would have to crash. So you were talking a lot of things going down before Bernie could win. Whether it be the primary or and if he gets in the general election, wow, they're going to hit him 10 times harder, 100 times harder. Now, why do I support Bernie? Do I think Bernie's the savior that's going to save America? No. No individual could save this country, no president. All Bernie can do is mitigate the suffering. This thing is crashing. It is run by the military-industrial complex, the Israel lobby, the bank cartels, the Rothschild Zionists, the deep state, the transnational corporations, the oligarchs. This confederation of evil runs this country, owns it, lock, stock, and barrel. The president is a figurehead. He has some sway in a few areas. And what I mean by Bernie mitigating suffering is that remember when they had the hurricane in Puerto Rico, Trump goes down, throws out a roll of paper towels, lets his cronies steal all the relief money like the Clinton Foundation did in Haiti. If the system crashes, Trump is going to do nothing to mitigate the suffering. He's only going to make it worse. He's trying to take away the pre-existing cause in health insurance. He wants to give the Medicare, Social Security over to the Wall Street parasites. Bernie could not stop that, but he may delay it a bit. He also, if there is a catastrophe, I can see Bernie building soup kitchens, maybe some kind of FDR, back to work programs, something to ease the suffering. If a person is, let's say, an old elderly person is collecting Medicare, Social Security, they're on Medicare. Let us say that there's a crippled person or a handicapped person collecting Social Security. They're going to lose it sooner if Trump stays in office. So maybe Bernie could mitigate their suffering, keep their benefits going a little bit longer. Somebody's in their 80s, that extra few years can make all the difference. Bernie would, if there was a catastrophic economic meltdown, I believe he would try to keep unemployment benefits rolling longer. However, Bernie's going to do nothing about the deep state, the surveillance, the increased prison gulags they're building, their checkpoints, their spying, the endless wars, because, as I said, there are other entities in control of this country. If Bernie tried to do anything to take that out, he would get JFK'd. Bernie's an elderly gentleman, a little drop of something in his food or drink, he has a heart attack the next day, it's over. They could do it like that. These deep state, Mossad, they have hit squads who could easily handle that. So there's no individual who's going to save this country. It is up to the people. It will take a mass awakening, a consciousness revolution. Unfortunately, I think things are going to get much worse before people start to wake up. And by then, it might devolve into some kind of civil war or real heavy helter-skelter scenario. All right. This is the Democratic Socialist Libertarian. Thanks for listening.